My name is Amelia Davis, and at 28 years old, I thought I knew everything about my life and my loving parents. That all changed when my phone lit up with a text from our family lawyer while I was sipping coffee at my favorite Boston cafe. The message was simple but terrifying: call me immediately. My stomach dropped as I read those words. Mom and Dad had been acting strange lately, canceling our weekly dinners and speaking in hushed tones when I visited. But nothing could have prepared me for what Michael was about to tell me. If you want to know the shocking truth about my parents that changed everything, drop a like, hit subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from. Trust me, you won't believe what happened next. I've always loved what I do. As an interior designer in Boston, I get to transform spaces and create beautiful homes for my clients. My eye for design was something my parents noticed early on and always encouraged. They were my biggest supporters, and I owe my success to them. At least that's what I always believed. Growing up in suburban Massachusetts, we were the picture-perfect middle-class family. Our two-story colonial home with its white picket fence and neatly trimmed lawn was the gathering place for neighborhood barbecues and holiday parties. Thomas and Catherine Davis were respected members of the community, Dad as a financial consultant and Mom as a high school English teacher. They volunteered at local charities, attended every school event, and never missed a single one of my dance recitals. Our family traditions were sacred. Every Thanksgiving, Mom would wake up at 5 in the morning to start preparing the turkey while Dad and I watched the Macy's parade in our pajamas. Summer always meant camping trips to Lake Winnipesaukee, where Dad taught me to fish and Mom read novels by the campfire. Christmas Eve meant hot chocolate and driving around to see the neighborhood lights. These moments defined my childhood, wrapping me in a sense of security I never questioned. When I got accepted to Boston University to study interior design, my parents threw a party and invited everyone they knew. They helped me move into my dorm, arranged care packages during finals week, and celebrated every small achievement. After graduation, they drove me to countless interviews and helped me find my first apartment, a tiny studio that Dad fixed up on weekends. 3 years ago, when I found my dream condo in Back Bay, it was my parents who surprised me by offering to help with the down payment. "We've been saving for this since you were born," Mom said, her eyes gleaming with pride. I cried that day, overwhelmed by their generosity. The condo with its high ceilings and original hardwood floors became my sanctuary, a place where I built my adult life. Our Sunday dinners were a constant in my busy schedule. No matter what was happening in my life or theirs, we gathered around Mom's dining table for pot roast or lasagna. They wanted to hear about every client, every project. When I started dating Jake 2 years ago, a software engineer with kind eyes and a quick wit, they welcomed him immediately. "Your parents are amazing," Jake would say after every visit. "You don't know how lucky you are." And I did feel lucky. Until things started changing about 3 months ago. It began with a canceled dinner, something that had never happened before. Mom called with a vague explanation about Dad not feeling well. The following week, another cancellation. This time they had unexpected company. I didn't think much of it until the third time, when Dad texted instead of called, saying they were tied up with some personal business. When I did see them, things felt off. Mom would change the subject whenever I asked about their plans for the summer. Dad spent more time checking his phone than engaging in conversation. Once, I arrived early and caught them quickly putting away papers from the dining table, Dad's face tense until he saw me and switched on a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Is everything okay?" I asked repeatedly. "Just busy with work and some financial planning," was always the answer. The last time I saw them was a week before the text. We had dinner, but conversation was strained. They asked about Jake and my latest design project, but their questions felt rehearsed. When I hugged them goodbye at the door, Mom held on a second longer than usual. "We're so proud of you, Amelia," she whispered. "Never forget that." Dad nodded, adding, "You've grown into an incredible woman. We couldn't ask for a better daughter." At the time, it felt like they were just being sentimental. I had no idea they were actually saying goodbye. The morning I received that text, I was meeting a potential client at Pavement Coffee on Newberry Street. The woman across from me was describing her vision for a nursery when my phone buzzed on the table. I glanced down, expecting it to be a message from my assistant about fabric samples. Instead, I saw Michael Stevens' name and those four alarming words, "Call me immediately." Michael had been our family lawyer for over 15 years. He handled my parents' will, their taxes, and even helped me with the paperwork when I purchased my condo. He was more than just a lawyer, he was almost like an uncle. Michael never texted unless it was important, and he certainly never used exclamation points. "I'm so sorry," I said to my client, "but I need to step outside for a moment." "Family emergency." The woman nodded sympathetically as I grabbed my phone and hurried out to the street. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed Michael's number. He answered on the first ring. "Amelia, thank you for calling back so quickly." His voice was tight, professional, lacking the warmth I was accustomed to. "What's going on, Michael? Is it my parents? Has there been an accident?" The questions tumbled out as pedestrians brushed past me on the busy sidewalk. There was a pause, then, "I think it's better if we discuss this in person. How soon can you come to my office? But are they okay? Just tell me if they're hurt." My voice rose with panic. "They're not injured," Michael said carefully. "But I really need to speak with you face to face. This isn't something I can explain over the phone." My stomach knotted with dread. "I can be there in 30 minutes. I apologized to my client, rescheduled our meeting, and drove across town to Michael's law firm in the financial district. The 15-story glass building housed one of Boston's most prestigious firms, where Michael was a senior partner. Normally, I admired the elegant lobby with its marble floors and modern art, but today I barely noticed as I rushed to the elevators. Michael's assistant, a normally cheerful woman named Lisa, gave me a solemn nod as I approached. "He's waiting for you," she said, opening his office door. Michael stood when I entered, gesturing to the leather chair across from his massive desk. The city skyline spread out behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows, but his usually appreciative glances at the view were absent. He looked older somehow, his silver hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. "Would you like some water?" "Coffee?" he offered, still standing. "I want to know what's happening," I demanded. "You're scaring me, Michael." He sighed heavily and sank back into his chair. "I received some troubling information this morning, Amelia. Information concerning your parents." "What kind of information?" Michael folded his hands on the desk. "There's been a major development regarding your parents. The police contacted me early this morning." "The police?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "Why would they contact you about my parents?" "Because I'm listed as the attorney of record for all their legal matters." He cleared his throat. "Amelia, your parents have emptied their bank accounts. All of them. Their retirement funds, savings, everything. The house has been listed for sale through a private broker. And they appear to have left the country." I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "That's impossible. I just saw them last week. They would have told me if they were moving or traveling." "I thought so too," Michael said. "That's why I immediately tried contacting them when the police called. Their phones have been disconnected. Their email accounts are deactivated." The room seemed to tilt. There must be some explanation. Maybe they're in trouble? Maybe someone is forcing them to do this? Michael's expression grew more pained. "The police don't think so. The evidence suggests this was carefully planned. They've been moving small amounts of money for months, staying under reporting thresholds. The house listing was prepared weeks ago. And the security footage from their bank shows them calmly withdrawing funds last Thursday." "But why?" I whispered. "Why would they just disappear without telling me?" Michael took a deep breath, and when he spoke again, his voice was gentle but firm. "Amelia, this is the most difficult part. The police investigation has uncovered something else. Your parents." He hesitated, clearly struggling with what he needed to say. Just tell me, I pleaded. Your parents aren't who you thought they were, Michael finally said. They'd been living under stolen identities for approximately 30 years. The words hung in the air, impossible to process. I actually laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. That's ridiculous. This is some kind of mistake. Michael shook his head slowly. I wish it were. But the evidence is compelling. The real Thomas and Catherine Davis died in a car accident in 1992. Their identities were stolen shortly afterward. I felt as if I'd been plunged into ice water. So who are my parents? That's what the FBI is trying to determine. The FBI? Now the FBI is involved? My voice rose hysterically. Identity theft across state lines falls under their jurisdiction, Michael explained. Plus, there are other concerns about possible federal crimes. I couldn't breathe. The walls of the elegant office seemed to close in. This can't be happening. I'm so sorry, Amelia. I had no idea. I've known your parents, or whoever they are, for 15 years. I would never have suspected anything. The floor seemed to drop out from beneath me as the full implication hit. My entire life was built on a lie. My parents weren't my parents. Or they were my parents, but they weren't who they claimed to be. Which meant I didn't know them at all. I need to see proof, I said, gripping the arms of the chair to stop my hands from shaking. I can't just take your word for this. Michael nodded and pulled a file from his desk drawer. The police shared these documents with me this morning. He slid several papers across the desk. The first was a death certificate for Thomas Andrew Davis, aged 27, and Catherine Marie Davis, aged 26, both killed in a highway collision on March 18, 1992. Next was a newspaper obituary with a grainy photo of a young couple that bore only a passing resemblance to the parents I knew. This doesn't prove anything, I said, pushing the papers back. It's just two people with the same names. There's more, Michael said gently, handing me another document. It was a report from the Social Security Administration showing that the Social Security numbers my parents had been using belonged to deceased individuals. The real Thomas and Catherine Davis never had children, Michael continued. They were newlyweds when they died. The people who took their identities assumed their names about 6 months after the accident. I felt dizzy. So my parents, they just stole dead people's names? Why would they do that? People typically assume new identities because they're hiding from something or someone, Michael said carefully. The police believe they may have been involved in criminal activity before becoming Thomas and Catherine Davis. That's impossible, I protested, but even as I said it, those recent strange behaviors flashed through my mind: the cancelled dinners, the hushed conversations, the papers hastily put away when I arrived early. The police searched your parents' financial records going back as far as they could, Michael continued. They found some concerning patterns. Your college fund, for instance. Your parents told you they saved for it since you were born, right? I nodded, remembering how proud they'd been when they presented me with a check for my first semester's tuition. The money appeared in a new account just 2 months before you started college. Large cash deposits, broken into smaller amounts to avoid reporting requirements. Maybe they kept it in cash? Some people don't trust banks. Even to my own ears, the defense sounded weak. And the down payment for your condo, Michael continued. Another series of cash deposits, beginning just weeks before they gave you the money. I thought about the generous gift that had made my dream home possible. Had that money come from some illegal source? The police have been to your parents' house, Michael said. It's been cleared out. Furniture, clothing, personal items all gone. The only things left are the built-in fixtures and some family photos. Photos? I seized on this. If they left photos behind, they must be planning to come back. Michael's expression remained grave. The detective thinks they left the photos because taking them would mean carrying evidence of their false identities. Tears burned in my eyes. No. There has to be an explanation. My parents wouldn't just abandon me. They love me. I believe they do, Michael said softly. But it seems they've been living with a secret their entire lives with you, and something made them decide to run. What am I supposed to do now? I asked, my voice breaking. The detective handling the case wants to speak with you. She thinks you might have information that could help them understand what happened, even if you don't realize it. I laughed bitterly. I clearly don't know anything about my parents at all. Michael reached across the desk and took my hand, a gesture so unexpected from the normally formal lawyer that fresh tears sprang to my eyes. Listen to me, Amelia. Whatever your parents did in the past, however they came to be the people you know, the love they showed you throughout your life was real. I saw it myself, countless times. No one can fake that kind of devotion for 28 years. I pulled my hand away, anger suddenly cutting through the shock. You don't know that. Maybe everything was fake. Maybe I was just part of their cover story. I don't believe that, Michael said firmly. And neither do you. The truth was, I didn't know what to believe anymore. My entire reality had just been shattered, and I was still trying to gather the pieces. The detective will want access to your parents' personal effects, anything they might have given you for safekeeping, any information about friends or contacts they had that weren't part of their regular social circle. I shook my head. They never gave me anything to keep for them. And they didn't have many close friends. Just colleagues from work and some neighbors they'd chat with at community events. Now I wondered if that had been deliberate. Had they kept people at a distance to protect their secrets? What happens now? I asked, feeling utterly lost. The police will continue their investigation. They'll try to determine your parents' true identities and locate them. Michael hesitated. And they'll be looking into whether you had any knowledge or involvement in whatever your parents were hiding from. You can't be serious, I gasped. You think I knew about this? I don't, Michael assured me. But the police have to explore every possibility. That's why it's important for you to cooperate fully with their investigation. I nodded numbly, still unable to fully process what was happening. There's one more thing, Michael said, his expression even more troubled than before. Your parents named me as executor of their will. I received a letter from them yesterday, delivered by private courier. He withdrew an envelope from his desk drawer and handed it to me. My name was written on the front in my mother's elegant handwriting. They instructed me to give this to you if they became unavailable, as they put it. Michael stood. I'll give you some privacy to read it. As he left the room, I stared at the envelope, both desperate to know what it contained and terrified of what I might learn. With trembling fingers, I tore it open and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. My darling Amelia, it began in my mother's handwriting. If you're reading this, then you've already learned some difficult truths about us. We never wanted you to find out this way. Please know that everything we did was to protect you. The love we have for you is the most real thing in our lives. We wish we could explain in person, but that would put you in danger. Trust Michael. He'll help you through this. And please, for your safety and ours, don't try to find us. We will always love you. Mom and Dad. I read the letter 3 times, searching for hidden meanings, for any clue about what danger they could possibly be referring to. But there was nothing, just vague reassurances and a goodbye that answered none of my questions. When Michael returned, I was still staring at the paper. They say they were protecting me, I said hoarsely. From what? Who would want to hurt us? I don't know, Michael admitted. But the detective might be able to help you figure that out. As I left his office, letter clutched in my hand, I felt as though I was walking through a nightmare. Everything familiar had suddenly become strange. Even my own identity felt uncertain. If my parents weren't who they claimed to be, then who exactly was Amelia Davis? Detective Sarah Morgan was nothing like the hard-boiled police officers I'd seen on TV. She was a petite woman in her 40s with kind eyes that contrasted with her no-nonsense demeanor. We met at my parents' house the day after my meeting with Michael. The home where I'd grown up now felt like a stranger's property. I understand this is difficult for you, Ms. Davis, Detective Morgan said as she unlocked the front door. But anything you notice that seems out of place or unusual could help us understand what happened. Walking into the empty house was surreal. The furniture was gone, leaving behind only dust outlines on the hardwood floors. The built-in bookshelves in the living room stood bare. The kitchen, once warm and fragrant with my mother's cooking, was cold and sterile. They took everything, I whispered. Not everything, Detective Morgan said, pointing to the wall in the hallway. The family photos were still hanging, chronicling my life from infancy through college graduation. My parents beaming beside me at every milestone. Why would they leave these? I asked, gently touching a photo of my 10th birthday party. People running from their past usually don't want to carry evidence of their false identities, Morgan explained. Photos could connect them to the lives they're abandoning. The detective's words stung, but I couldn't argue with them. It was clear my parents had methodically planned their disappearance. I'd like to see their bedroom, I said. Upstairs, the master bedroom was similarly empty, no bed, no dressers, no clothing in the closets. But something felt off about the room's dimensions. The closet looked smaller inside than it should be, I noted, stepping into the walk-in closet and tapping the back wall. There was a hollow sound. Morgan joined me, pressing different sections of the wall until one panel moved slightly. With careful pressure, it slid aside, revealing a small hidden compartment. Inside was a metal box. We should use gloves to handle this, Morgan said, retrieving a pair from her jacket pocket and carefully removing the box. She placed it on the floor and opened it. Inside were 2 passports with unfamiliar names, James and Elizabeth Wilson, but photos of my parents. There was also about $5,000 in cash, a small notebook with strings of numbers and letters, and several newspaper clippings. I picked up one of the yellowed clippings. The headline read, "Bank Heist Nets Thieves $3.7 million." The article was dated August 1992, just months after the real Thomas and Catherine Davis had died. 4 armed individuals entered First National Bank of Chicago at 10:17 a.m., I read aloud. They disarmed security, accessed the vault, and escaped with nearly $4 million in cash and bearer bonds. One suspect, Robert Carlson, was apprehended at the scene. 3 accomplices remain at large. I looked up at Detective Morgan, my heart pounding. You don't think? It's a strong possibility, she said grimly. The timing fits with when your parents assumed their new identities. But my parents aren't criminals, I protested. My father gets nervous about jaywalking. My mother returns items to the store if they accidentally undercharge her. People can change a lot in 30 years, Morgan said gently. Especially if they're motivated by fear of getting caught. As we continued searching, Morgan found a hollowed-out copy of Great Expectations in the built-in bookshelf in the hallway. Inside was a USB drive. We'll need to examine this, she said, placing it in an evidence bag. It could contain important information. The detective's phone rang, and she stepped away to answer it. When she returned, her expression was even more serious. That was my partner. Your parents had a storage unit across town registered under Thomas Davis's name. We just got a warrant to search it. The storage facility was in a commercial area I rarely visited. Unit 317 was secured with a heavy padlock, which the facility manager cut off with bolt cutters. Morgan slid the door up, revealing a space about the size of a 1-car garage, packed with items. Unlike the empty house, the storage unit contained furniture I'd never seen before, expensive-looking pieces that seemed far more luxurious than anything my parents had in our home. There were also several locked trunks, paintings wrapped in protective coverings, and a safe. Your parents appear to have been living below their means, Morgan commented as we surveyed the contents. None of this makes sense, I said, running my hand over a mahogany desk that looked antique and valuable. Why would they keep these things hidden? Morgan carefully opened one of the trunks, revealing designer clothing with tags still attached. Another contained jewelry, not costume pieces but real gold and gemstones, based on my limited knowledge. People hiding their true identities often keep their spending modest to avoid drawing attention, Morgan explained. But that doesn't mean they don't enjoy luxury items in private. In a box of electronics, the detective found several burner phones and a laptop. "We'll take these back to the station for analysis," she said. As we continued exploring, I found a file folder containing travel documents, numerous trips to the Cayman Islands over the past 20 years, always for about a week, always in late February. "Offshore banking," Morgan murmured, reviewing the papers. "The Cayman Islands are known for their banking privacy laws." "My parents always told me they were going to a financial conference," I said numbly. "Dad's work. They'd bring me back little souvenirs." Morgan nodded sympathetically. "They maintained their cover story consistently. That's why they were able to live undetected for so long." In a smaller box near the back of the unit, I found a stack of letters addressed to names I didn't recognize: James and Elizabeth Wilson, the same names from the passports. The return address was a P.O. box in Miami, and the most recent letter was dated just a month ago. Morgan took the letters for evidence, but allowed me to read them first. They were vague, discussing mutual friends and business interests, but never specifying details. They were signed simply R.C. "Robert Carlson," I whispered, remembering the name from the bank heist article. "The accomplice who was caught." "He was sentenced to 30 years, Morgan confirmed. "And would have been eligible for parole recently." A cold realization washed over me. Is that why they ran? Because he was getting out of prison? "It's a theory we're considering," Morgan admitted. "If your parents were involved in the robbery, they might have feared retribution from their former partner." I shook my head adamantly. "There has to be another explanation. The people who raised me, who taught me right from wrong, who made me who I am, they couldn't be bank robbers." Morgan placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "People are complicated, Ms. Davis. They can compartmentalize different aspects of their lives. The loving parents you knew could be genuine while still hiding a criminal past." "I don't believe it," I insisted, but the evidence was mounting, becoming impossible to ignore. As we prepared to leave, Morgan handed me her card. "Call me if you remember anything that might help. Unusual visitors over the years, strange phone calls, comments about their lives before you were born. Anything at all." I nodded numbly, but as I walked to my car, I realized I had more questions than when we started. Who were my parents, really? What had they done? And most troubling of all, was their love for me part of their disguise, or the one true thing in their deception-filled lives? I called in sick to work the next day, and the day after that. Eventually, I requested a leave of absence, explaining vaguely that I was dealing with a family emergency. My boss was understanding, but I could hear the curiosity in her voice. Soon, everyone would know. It was only a matter of time before the media picked up the story of the missing couple with false identities and their daughter who knew nothing. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faces of my parents, both as I had always known them and now as strangers wearing familiar masks. I'd stare at the ceiling of my bedroom in the condo they had helped me buy, wondering if it had been purchased with stolen money. Jake tried his best to support me. He brought food when I forgot to eat, held me when I cried, and didn't push when I couldn't explain everything I was feeling. "Whatever happens, we'll get through it together," he promised, stroking my hair as I lay curled against him on the couch, emotionally exhausted. But how could he understand? His family was normal: a father who coached Little League, a mother who baked cookies for school fundraisers, a sister who called him daily to chat about nothing important. They were exactly who they appeared to be. What if everything they ever told me was a lie? I asked him one night, after waking from a nightmare where my parents were strangers speaking a language I couldn't understand. "Not everything," Jake said firmly. "The way they looked at you when you showed them your first big design project, that pride wasn't fake. The way your mom always kept tissues in her purse because you have allergies, that concern wasn't fake. The way your dad insisted on checking your car's oil every time you visited, that love wasn't fake. I wanted to believe him. Needed to believe him. But doubt had taken root and was growing with each new revelation from Detective Morgan's investigation. My friends didn't know how to react. Most avoided the subject entirely, chatting about trivial things as if nothing had changed. A few awkwardly offered support but quickly changed the subject when I couldn't provide simple answers to their questions. I couldn't blame them. What exactly do you say to someone whose entire family history just imploded? I think you should talk to someone, Jake suggested after I spent an entire Saturday going through old photo albums, analyzing every picture for clues I might have missed. A professional, I mean. I knew he was right. This wasn't something I could process alone. But the thought of explaining everything to a stranger seemed overwhelming. How could I make sense of it to someone else when I couldn't make sense of it myself? Still, I made an appointment with a therapist specializing in trauma and identity issues. Dr. Marshall was calm and didn't seem shocked by anything I told her. It's natural to question everything now, she assured me. Your foundation has been shaken. But over time, you'll sort through what was real and what wasn't. In the meantime, I became obsessed with finding inconsistencies in my parents' stories about their past. I created a timeline on my living room wall, pinning notes and photos in chronological order. There were gaps I'd never noticed before. My parents claimed to have grown up in small towns in the Midwest, but their knowledge of those places seemed vague whenever I asked specific questions. They had no extended family, both only children whose parents had died before I was born. No aunts, uncles, or cousins. No old friends from high school or college who kept in touch. It was the perfect cover story, I told Dr. Marshall during our second session. No connections to verify, no relatives to question their background. What about their wedding album? She asked. Most couples have photos, keepsakes. I realized with a start that I'd never actually seen their wedding photos. They said the album was damaged in a basement flood before I was born, I recalled. I never thought to question it. Other memories surfaced, gaining new significance in light of what I now knew. The locked desk drawer in my father's office that I was never allowed to open. The hushed phone calls that ended when I entered the room. The vacation to Canada that was abruptly cancelled when I was 12 after my father saw a news report about increased border security. More troubling was the memory of men watching our house when I was in high school. I'd noticed the same car parked across the street several days in a row, with different men inside each time. When I pointed it out to my father, his face had gone pale. The next day, he installed a sophisticated security system, claiming there had been break-ins in the neighborhood. We took a spontaneous 2-week vacation immediately afterward. Had those men been investigators? Or something more sinister? The more I remembered, the more I questioned not just my parents' identity but my own. Who was Amelia Davis if Davis wasn't even our real name? Was my first name chosen by my parents, or was it part of their false identity too? Identity isn't just about names, Dr. Marshall told me. It's about who you've become through your experiences, your choices, your values. Values they taught me, I pointed out bitterly. Don't lie. Don't steal. Always do the right thing. Meanwhile, they were living a lie every single day. Even Jake's unwavering support began to wear thin. He couldn't understand why I was pulling away, why I questioned everything, why I sometimes looked at him and wondered if he was hiding something too. You can't live like this, he said after finding me at 3 a.m, still adding notes to my timeline. You can't suspect everyone because your parents deceived you. Can't I? I shot back. They managed to fool everyone for nearly 30 years. If they could do it, anyone could. The strain began to show in our relationship. Jake wanted me to move forward, to focus on the future. But I was trapped in the past, trying desperately to separate truth from fiction. Maybe you should talk to Michael again, Jake suggested one evening after another argument about my obsession with the investigation. He knew your parents for years. He might have insights the police don't. It was the first helpful suggestion I'd heard in weeks. Michael had been my parents' confidant, their legal advisor. If anyone might know something that could help me understand, it would be him. I called his office the next morning and scheduled an appointment for that afternoon. As I entered the familiar building, I felt a strange mix of dread and hope. Would today bring more painful revelations, or finally some answers that might help me make peace with the truth? Michael greeted me with the same grave expression he'd worn during our last meeting. 2 weeks had passed since then, but it felt like years. "How are you holding up?" he asked as I took a seat across from his desk. "Not well," I admitted. "Every day brings some new revelation that makes me question everything I thought I knew." Michael nodded sympathetically. "Detective Morgan has been keeping me updated on the investigation. I understand they found some concerning items in your parents' storage unit." "That's one way to put it," I said bitterly. "Hidden wealth, fake passports, mysterious letters from someone who might be a convicted bank robber. Just everyday family secrets." "Amelia," Michael began carefully, "there's been a development. The FBI cybercrime unit has managed to access that USB drive found at your parents' house." My heart began racing. "What was on it?" "A video," Michael said, turning his laptop toward me. "Your parents recorded a message for you. The FBI has reviewed it and allowed me to share it with you." I stared at the computer screen, both desperate and terrified to see what it contained. "Are you ready?" Michael asked gently. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Michael clicked play, and suddenly there they were, my parents, sitting side by side on what looked like a hotel room sofa. They looked exhausted but composed. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. "Amelia, sweetheart," my father began. His voice, so familiar yet now strange to my ears, made my eyes fill with tears. "If you're watching this, then you know by now that we've had to leave, and you've learned some difficult truths about us. We owe you an explanation." My mother reached for his hand, squeezing it before she spoke. "First and most importantly, we want you to know that everything we felt for you was real. You are the best thing in our lives, our greatest joy, our true legacy. Nothing about our love for you was ever false or part of any deception. But we haven't been honest about our past," my father continued. "Our real names are James and Elizabeth Wilson. Before you were born, before we became Thomas and Catherine Davis, we made a terrible mistake." My mother wiped a tear from her cheek. "In 1992, we were young and desperate. James had lost his job, we were deeply in debt, and I had just found out I was pregnant with you." I gasped. "They had known they were expecting me before they changed identities?" "We became involved with 2 other people in a plan to rob a bank," my father continued, his voice steady but filled with regret. "It wasn't supposed to be violent, no one was meant to get hurt. But things went wrong. A security guard had a heart attack during the robbery. He survived, but barely. And Robert, one of our accomplices, was caught. We got away with our share of the money," my mother said. "Nearly $1 million. We were horrified by what had happened, especially the guard's injury. We decided to disappear, to start over. We found out about a couple who had died in a car accident with no close family, Thomas and Catherine Davis. We took their identities." "It was wrong," my father added firmly. "We know that. There's no excusing what we did. But we were desperate and afraid, especially with a baby on the way." My mother leaned forward, her eyes intense. "When you were born, everything changed for us, Amelia. We knew we couldn't continue being the people we had been. We put most of the money in a secure location and used only what we needed to establish our new lives. We got legitimate jobs, became part of the community. We wanted to raise you right, to be the kind of parents you deserved. We thought we'd left our past behind completely," my father said. "Until 3 months ago, when we received word that Robert was being released from prison. He'd served 28 years of a 30-year sentence." My mother's face grew fearful. "Robert always blamed us for his capture. He believed we set him up, though we didn't. He swore he'd find us someday, no matter how long it took or what names we were using. We started receiving letters, my father explained. Just vague threats at first, but then details that proved he knew exactly who we were and where we lived. He mentioned you by name, Amelia. A chill ran through me as I remembered the letters signed RC in the storage unit. We couldn't risk staying, my mother continued. Not when he threatened you. That's why we helped with your condo down payment. We wanted you to have security, something that was yours that couldn't be taken away. We've set up an offshore account in your name, my father added. Information about how to access it is with Michael. It's not the stolen money, that's long gone, used to build our lives over the years. This is money we've saved legitimately through our careers. It's yours, no strings attached. My mother wiped away more tears. We don't expect you to forgive us, sweetheart. We lied to you your entire life. But please believe that who we were as your parents, that was the real us. The love, the values we taught you, the support we gave, none of that was part of any disguise. We won't contact you again, my father said, his voice breaking slightly. It's too dangerous for all of us. But know that we will always love you, Amelia. Always. The screen went black, leaving me staring at my own reflection in the darkened display. Tears streamed down my face unchecked. They were running to protect me, I whispered, the realization both painful and oddly comforting. Michael nodded. The FBI has confirmed most of what they said. Robert Carlson was released from prison 3 months ago after serving 28 years for the Chicago bank robbery. They've been trying to locate him, as he violated parole shortly after release. Do they believe my parents were telling the truth? About the robbery, about Carlson threatening me? They found evidence supporting their story, Michael confirmed. The timing of their disappearance coincides with Carlson's release. And those letters you found in the storage unit contained veiled threats that FBI analysts believe referenced you. I felt strangely hollow, drained of the anger and confusion that had consumed me for weeks. So they really did leave to protect me. It appears so, Michael said gently. Detective Morgan asked me to tell you that while your parents did commit crimes in the past, identity theft, and likely the bank robbery, the statute of limitations has expired on most of those offenses. The FBI is more concerned with locating Carlson now. Where are my parents? I asked. Do they know? Michael shook his head. They have some leads, but nothing concrete. Your parents were very thorough in covering their tracks. He slid a folder across the desk. This contains the information about the account they mentioned. There's quite a substantial sum there, just over $2 million. Legitimately earned, as far as the FBI can determine. They've cleared it for your use. I stared at the folder without touching it. I don't know if I can accept it. That's entirely your decision, Michael said. But regardless of their past mistakes, it's clear your parents wanted to provide for you, to give you security. I finally reached for the folder, feeling the weight of it in my hands, the weight of my parents' final gift, their attempt to care for me even in their absence. Will I ever see them again? I asked, already knowing the answer. Michael's expression was kind but realistic. I think they meant what they said about not contacting you. They believe it's the safest course for everyone, especially while Carlson remains at large. I nodded, fresh tears forming. I have so many questions still. Things only they can answer. Perhaps someday, Michael said softly. But for now, I think they've given you the truth they felt you needed most, that despite the lies about their identities, their love for you was always genuine. As I left Michael's office, clutching the folder with information about my inheritance, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks, a small measure of peace. The ground beneath my feet was still unsteady, my sense of self still fragmented, but I had one certainty to cling to: my parents, whoever they really were, had loved me enough to leave everything behind to keep me safe. 6 months passed. The leaves changed, fell, and were replaced by snow that eventually melted into spring. The world continued turning, indifferent to my personal upheaval. Slowly, painfully, I began rebuilding my life. The first month after learning the truth about my parents was the hardest. I alternated between rage, grief, and crushing confusion. Dr. Marshall saw me 3 times a week, guiding me through the tangled emotions that threatened to drown me. "You're mourning," she explained during one particularly difficult session. "Not just your parents' physical absence, but the loss of the narrative you believed about your life." She was right. I was grieving the family I thought I had, the history I believed was mine. Some days, I'd walk through the empty house where I grew up, now under police seal as the investigation continued, and try to separate genuine memories from what now seemed like an elaborately staged production. The money my parents left me remained untouched at first. I couldn't bring myself to use it, as if accepting their financial support would mean forgiving their deception. But as Detective Morgan continued to confirm the details from their video confession, I began to see their actions in a different light. "All evidence suggests they were telling the truth," Morgan told me during one of our regular updates. "They were young, made terrible choices, and spent the rest of their lives trying to atone in whatever way they could." The FBI eventually located Robert Carlson in Miami, where he'd been staying with a cousin. He was arrested for parole violations and new charges related to illegal weapons possession. During questioning, he admitted to sending threatening letters to my parents. "He was bitter," Morgan explained. "Nearly 30 years in prison while your parents built a new life. He wanted revenge." Knowing Carlson was in custody provided some relief, though I still checked my locks twice each night and startled at unexpected noises. The fear that had driven my parents to flee had become my inheritance as well. Jake stood by me through everything, though our relationship was severely tested. There were days when I pushed him away, convinced that everyone in my life might be hiding something. There were nights I woke up screaming from nightmares where everyone I loved wore masks they suddenly removed, revealing strangers beneath. "I'm not going anywhere," Jake would say, holding me until the trembling stopped. "Not unless you tell me to." I never did tell him to go, and his steady presence became my anchor in a world that had lost all stability. 3 months after my parents disappeared, I made a decision about the money. I couldn't bring myself to spend it on myself, but neither could I return it to people who no longer existed. After discussions with Jake and Dr. Marshall, I established a foundation to support children affected by parental incarceration. They grow up visiting parents behind glass, stigmatized for crimes they didn't commit, I explained to Michael when he helped me set up the legal framework. They need support systems, people who understand what they're going through. Michael had smiled, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "Your parents would approve of this, I think. Using their legacy to help break cycles of trauma." Gradually, I returned to work, finding solace in creating beautiful spaces for clients. Design had always been my passion, and immersing myself in colors, textures, and proportions provided escape from my own chaotic emotions. I moved to a new apartment, unable to stay in the condo my parents had helped purchase. The memories were too complicated there. Jake moved in with me, our relationship deepening through the shared trauma. We talked about marriage, about building a family untainted by secrets. The idea terrified and excited me in equal measure. "What if I don't know how to be honest with children?" I asked Dr. Marshall. "What if deception is somehow in my blood?" "Deception isn't genetic," she assured me. "And you've had the rare opportunity to see the damage secrets can cause. That understanding makes you less likely to repeat those patterns, not more." I wanted to believe her. Needed to believe her. And most days, I did. 4 months after they disappeared, I stopped searching for my parents' faces in crowds. 5 months after, I packed away the timeline I'd created on my living room wall. 6 months after, I began using the name Amelia Wilson Davis on personal projects, acknowledging both the identity I'd always known and the truth I'd discovered. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday in spring, a letter arrived with no return address. I recognized my mother's handwriting immediately, though the postmark was from a small town in New Zealand I'd never heard of. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a brief note, just a few lines: "We are safe. We think of you every day. The foundation is beautiful work. We are so proud of the woman you've become. We love you always. No signature. No way to reply. Just confirmation that they were alive, that they were watching from afar, that they still loved me. I didn't tell the police about the letter. Perhaps that made me complicit in their flight from justice, but I couldn't bring myself to potentially lead authorities to them. Whatever crimes they had committed happened before I was born, and they had spent my entire lifetime trying to be good people, good parents. Do you think you'll ever see them again? Jake asked when I showed him the letter. I don't know, I answered honestly. Maybe someday, when enough time has passed and it's safe for everyone. But even if I don't, I know now that they really did love me. That wasn't part of their cover story. The letter became my talisman, proof that despite the lies and the loss, there was something real at the core of our family. I kept it in my bedside drawer, reading it on the hardest days when doubt threatened to overwhelm me again. I'll never fully understand the choices my parents made. I'll never know all the details of their lives before they became Thomas and Catherine Davis. But I've come to accept that love and deception can coexist, that people can be both deeply flawed and genuinely caring. My parents taught me integrity while living a lie. They instilled values they themselves had once betrayed. They protected me from their past until they could no longer shield me without endangering me further. Their love was real even when their identities were false. As Dr. Marshall often reminds me, healing isn't about forgetting or even necessarily forgiving. It's about integrating painful truths into a new understanding of yourself and your story. It's about finding meaning in suffering and growth in disillusionment. I'm still working on that integration, still creating a new narrative that accommodates both what I always believed and what I now know. Some days are harder than others. Some memories still sting when examined in the light of truth. But I'm moving forward, building a life that honors both my past and my future. If my parents taught me anything genuine, it's resilience. The ability to start over when necessary, to find strength in vulnerability, to create something beautiful from broken pieces. That legacy, at least, is one I can embrace without reservation. Have you ever discovered a secret that changed how you saw someone you loved? How did you reconcile the person you knew with the truth you discovered? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family secrets, personal growth, and finding truth. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the most painful revelations can lead to the most profound healing.